Hello everyone, this is a special because I'm not in a virtual studio today, I'm actually in a really cool architecture practice. And you know, it's a really nice office to be in, and I think we're going to talk a bit about that today. So I've got a special guest here who I'm so excited to do this with. You're laughing all the
I'm
time.
nervous.
No, you're not, you're amazing. But yeah, so I've got awesome Associate Director, Architect, Hollie Welch from dMFK. Hollie, how are you?
Hello, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm all right, you know, it's a nice day. You've got a beautiful view out here.
We've got a moody backdrop today, in fact. The heavens have opened, but here we are. I think the office is still looking good.
Yeah, looks great. Quick one before we go into it. Did you design this little fit out then, or were you part of the team?
I'd say it was definitely part of the design development. It's
Yeah.
sort of taken cues from some of the other office fit-outs that we've done
Yeah.
in the area.
Yeah.
So not taking total credit there,
No.
but it's definitely a team collaborative.
That's nice. That's a
Design.
good attitude, you know, not taking all the credit. But no, I really appreciate it. So, while we know each other a little bit, some of the people in the audience, they might not have met you before. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself first and foremost?
Yeah, how far do we want to go?
You know, what made you get into architecture then?
Okay, so I studied back in, I'm from the Northeast, in case the accent isn't obvious.
Yeah.
I was actually encouraged to go and study architecture by my art teacher at the time, back
Okay.
in school. That's shout out to Stokesley School. And then went on to study at Northumbria University there, did my BA there for the
Yeah.
first 3 years. It was really great, actually, because obviously we went into that, not I say we, as a collective, me and my friends, still very close friends with,
Yeah.
not really knowing what the course would entail and not really understanding anything about the architectural profession
Yeah.
either. The school was really successful at that time. It was quite small,
Yeah.
so it actually meant that we got a lot of one-to-one time and engagement with tutors who, a lot of them at the time were practicing in Newcastle as well.
Right.
So that was really fantastic. And then reached the sort of year out stage there.
Yeah.
And I studied with Practice Space Architects.
Okay.
They are based out in Long Benton, so just sort of outside of Newcastle. And they specialise in a lot of civic projects rather than
Yeah,
commercial,
yeah.
or sort of big like master plan, hotel, you know, that kind of sector.
Yeah.
A bit of residential and educational.
Yeah.
So I hadn't really worked in any commercial fit out
Yeah.
prior to that. Then I went back to do my masters again at Northumbria University, and then finishing the masters, I decided it was the time to come down to London. I was really quite selective about where I wanted to go at the time. I'd done lots of research and had some interviews, some successful, some not, and then had my interview with dMFK.
Okay.
At the time, the office was based up in West Hampstead. So for anyone who knows West Hampstead, it's sort of quite suburban, I'd say. And we were housed in the old library building. So it's sort of like quite quaint, really. And I remember sort of walking in there, sort of immediately feeling like an energy and a bit of a vibe. And I sort of thought, I can definitely see myself sort of fitting in here. So that would have been the end of 2016. So I started at dMFK 2017, been here for nearly 8 years.
Wow.
Famously, first day was on the Christmas party.
Really? That's
so-
dangerous. That can go either way.
Yeah, I was quite reserved at the time.
Yeah.
Sort of went along for a few hours and then came away. But anyway, so yeah, been with dMFK for nearly 8 years. It's just been really fantastic to see how we've grown. As we discussed
Yeah.
earlier, sort of fell into doing the commercial work, really.
Yeah.
I'd always had an appetite for looking more at the sort of internal spaces, not sort of interior architecture, but sort of having a go at that, having
Yeah.
not really experienced or been exposed to that at all up in Newcastle. And then, you know, slowly got onto some projects and it sort of, you know, went from there. And, you know, sort of this office, I suppose, is the sort of culmination
Yeah.
of the development of workspace design that we've worked on, you know, as a team. And, you know, it's sort of an exciting time for us.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. So when you jumped into commercial projects back in 2017, the landscape of, and when we say commercial, we mean offices, right?
Yeah.
So it was very different back then. So but even myself, so in 2015, I used to rent a WeWork office, which at the time was like a glass cubicle.
Yeah.
And then you'd have these big sprawling offices. But then, of course, midway from here and there, the pandemic happened, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So what was the offices like you were designing before? And then what was that massive shock to the system like?
Well, I suppose so. My first office project, so I've said I sort of didn't have any exposure to this really,
Yeah.
and then the first, commercial office space project that I worked for was a project for TOG, the office group.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So obviously we've been sort of long-term collaborators with them.
Okay, because they're quite bougie spaces.
Yeah, we like a bougie space.
I like it. Yeah, it's a good office, Tog.
So
Yeah.
we've done up until this point. So I think this would have been maybe late 2017, early 2018. They'd acquired a space in 1 Canada Square, Canary Wharf, so iconic Caesar Pelé design building, the sort of, the landmark of Canary Wharf. And they'd taken 3 floors 7, 8 and 9. So he was working on the sort of the fit out of that space and trying to incorporate at the time the office group service office space product within that space. I think I'm correct in saying that at the time that was their largest acquisition. So it was sort of developing a model that was already quite successed in that, allowing tenants to come in, 2-person studio, 4-person office, and to be able to expand or reduce in scale, but then sort of retaining the identity of the building that they're working within. I think that was something that was super successful. Going on to 1 Canada Square, some 90,000 square feet
That's
of workspace.
massive.
I don't want to get into it too much because we'll be here all day.
Oh,
Could
that's
talk
cool.
for forever about it. Really, really great project. The way that we approached the interiors was to sort of draw from the existing building. So it's very sort of late 80s, early 90s, like high commercial, high corporate architecture. And it's sort of how we would lean into that, but sort of incorporate it in a contemporary way. And I think, off record or maybe on record, it's still one of my favourite projects. Unfortunately, the sort of timing of that delivery was unfortunate.
Yeah.
In that it completed around 2019, obviously.
Right
COVID,
before.
Right at the end, so November 2019, then COVID hit, so, and Canary Wharf, one of the sort of most hard-hit locations in terms of scale of office space, working from home. So I think that, the way that we still approach the office space design is still very much the same, but I think that Todd was sort of at the forefront of looking at how to attract people, how to retain people, how to get people into those spaces rather than working from home. Effectively, it was the startup co-work, which in principle is trying to get people a space to work at that isn't their home,
Yeah. It is interesting how they've adjusted, because I've also been in the WeWork. I know it's not a TOG, and TOG is better, right? But WeWork don't kick me out also. But it is cool how it's changed, because I think the designs at the time, it was more about these big offices and then the breakout spaces where maybe they get a coffee to. However, is there now more of an appetite for people to come in, bring their laptops, collaborate, open space? So has it changed the rule book in that kind of area?
Yeah, I think the thing is, it's just providing people, occupants, tenants with a choice of where they want to work and how they want to work, varying degrees of privacy and openness. And obviously we've seen that sort of dial up to the next level now with requirements for video calling, which obviously existed prior to the pandemic, but now almost across the board, across all the clients that we work with, whether that's legal, whether it's sort of like project management, everybody, or educational even, everybody wants to enhance their facilities to be able to accommodate, people to do Zoom calls, video calls. And to touch on your point about the WeWork, very sort of successful at the time, but I think the sort of the attraction for those spaces or the sort of want to be in those spaces sort of diminished with the growth of of video calls, etc., because there's no control over acoustics. And I think that's a fundamental sort of design or office etiquette issue that lots of clients are trying to address in their fit outs. So it's less about placement of gestural furniture and more about functional, practical spaces that enable people to work while, allowing other people to sit quietly, so.
Yeah. So was it then a case of the rule book as it was for commercial offices was ripped up, and then there were people like yourself who were really thinking about honing in on what does the client need, what does the person in the office need? Were you learning as you going and then starting to identify what was really important going forwards?
I think that I wouldn't necessarily say that the rule book has changed.
Okay.
I think that there's been a shift over the years from what would have been, if you start at the beginning, but cellularized offices that you might associate with sort of in the 90s. So let's say the battery chicken operation.
The cubicle.
Yeah,
the blue boundaries, pictures on the wall.
Yeah, exactly. And then sort of moving from that towards much more open plan.
Yeah.
And then the type of work that we would be doing, sort of Cat A. So we'd find or would be approached to redevelop a building. We'd be doing, lift lobby, WCs, maybe main reception, and then the office space would be let as Cat A. And then sort of how that's then developed to target, what people want from the space, and not to loop back to Tog.
Yeah.
That really became focused on the amenities within the shared space within the offices. So within the building, sorry. So while the offices might just be Cat A, it's about providing all these amenities in the shared space that people can utilise.
Okay.
And also it's about sort of, collaboration, community, creating a work environment where, people go to communal spaces and they mix. You get a break out of your own office space. So I think that, component parts that we always look at when we approach these things, obviously it's demised reception, it's what we call breakout. That might be, focused work. We always say the family table, so kind of like we have in this office, a space that can be used for sort of informal collaboration, discussion, meeting room, obviously private meeting rooms as well, tea points for beverage, tea points and kitchenettes, that sort of thing. And I think as that's evolved, so if you sort of take that as a product, then the next evolution of that is, okay, well, some tenants, are attracted to taking a space in that building with those shared amenities, but actually they don't necessarily want to share with dMFK next door because they've monopolised or colonised maybe the breakout space. So, how about we try and develop the product to share some of these amenities between common parts, so you're still providing space for interaction and breakout, but then you're also providing that sort of extra level of amenity within the demised office space. And I think that's what we would call the Cat B approach. So it's sort of similar to what we've got here. So, all of those shared amenities are within the one demise. So it's a ready to go is another terminology that we use, or plug and play. And I think that the evolution of that further brings us on to Story. Which is
the important project. So for the listeners, I'm going to edit it in a bit, but you'll see some amazing pictures. Ooh, of Story. But please carry on. So I'll splice the images in.
Yeah. So obviously, the market is full of lots of office space providers. We've recently completed Story, which is the service office space product for British Land. They've got several locations all around Liverpool Street, sort of Broadgate area. I think that they're a really fantastic client, super engaged throughout the process, which has been really enjoyable. They're engaged with the design process, but they're also incredibly focused on the end user as well. And just really, I feel like they really sort of understand their client, or not their client, sorry, their occupier needs. And I think that they've evolved their product to suit. So going on from what I said about the Cat B, the Story product differs in the sense that, or it stands out, let's say, because you still have the common parts with your tea point, your work tables, your enclosed focus booths, phone booths, etc. But then there's an enhanced provision within the demised offices as well to provide tea points and meeting rooms within those spaces also. So it's kind of like, it's almost the next tier of amenity, if that makes sense. So while we're not sort of fitting them out to this sort of this level, the idea is that a client, a tenant can come along, they've got the identity of the postcode of that building, which I should have said is at 201 Bishopsgate.
There you go.
We'll get into more detail about
I'll
it.
put it all up. All that
Yeah.
stuff is magically here in the final cut, so don't worry.
So you get the postcode, you get the building address, you get the sort of grandeur and stature of the building, arrival experience, etc. And then you go up onto the floor, which is the level 7, and then you're then welcomed by breakout spaces, like really great. I say that building particularly, like really great sense of space and volume, and we'll get into the detail of that a little more. But then, your office space as well has the same functionality as the common parts. I think that's just the sort of the next layer, if you like.
Very, very cool. So that's clearly an awesome and important project, and I'm sure everyone will agree that it all looks great. What do you think then? Of course, we never know which way the future will go. The pandemic was like an indicator of it. But what's your sentiment for the future of commercial workplace and offices then? Do you see it continuing to go down this directory and this direction per se?
I think the thing is, we've got we collectively, dMFK, got a lot of experience in the workplace sector. We work with a whole range of clients who are all great and all really invested in the end product. Have we got the ultimate answer? No. Because, it's tailored to the product. It's tailored to it's not tailored to, it's dictated by development budgets as well and costs. Not everybody wants to take on a Cat B or an end user fit out space. I suppose it's thinking about like lease as well, lease expiry. At the moment we're getting, when I sort of say I've lost my train of thought.
Don't worry about it.
Spit out. I've sort of forgotten what your original question was.
No, don't worry. We're talking about just where the industry's
going. Somebody
going.
walked past that I knew and it totally distracted me.
Who do you know? You're like, hey.
It's actually my friend.
Is he your friend? You're going to get a WhatsApp chat saying what's happening.
Actually, so he'll be like, what the hell are you doing here?
I think this should all make it in because it's real. But
yeah, it's a bit of the chaos. Maybe you can block out the vacant expression.
You're just giving out more
what
and more.
we're talking about is
you're giving out so much. I guess I'm just more interested in like the sentiment of how positive do you feel like commercial workplace. It seems like it's busy.
Yeah, I'd say it's busy. What I was getting to, sorry, my point about lease expiry. There's lots of buildings that are, they're really well designed. They are coming towards the end of their lease. Buildings from around, let's say, like 2005, 2010. The fit outs are dated, the services are dated. It's come into the natural cycle of renewal, and I think we as a practice are experiencing that. I'd say where the uncertainty lies is in this sort of the scope of refurbishment along, if you were to take the line of that traditional Cat A to the end user fit out. It's where that sits, and I think we're seeing a lot of developers now sort of reverting back to Cat A, and I suppose that sort of opens up a wider conversation about sustainability and ESGs, and the sort of Cat A or Cat B, however we want to talk about it, the sort of the role that plays in sort of construction waste, basically, and how right or wrong is it that we should be fitting out these spaces on short-term leases, 3 to 5 years, and then at the end of that it gets scrapped. How do we go from there? Also, rising construction costs as well. I think sustainability generally, it's something that actually with Story we really, really worked hard with, mainly in terms of trying to select materials that had great sustainability stories or bespoke furniture items that had a compelling tale. But I think that in the industry, there's still a bit of a playoff between having that sort of sustainability credential or certification versus the costs associated with it, and also the time period in which to sort of, procure said item in line with the construction program. I think as well, there's so many great products on the market now as well, not just finishes, but furniture as well. But I think that, some clients, I think, may be a little bit hesitant to go for those from the sort of robustness standpoint. So, I think there's a lot of products that are coming at a premium. Not to say that they can't or aren't designed to last and to endure, but I think there's still a little bit of uncertainty about those products and how they'll fare. Actually, just down the road here, a couple of years back, we did a fit out for Derwent London, 19 Fitzroy Street, and we at the time fitted a cork flooring, and it's a commercial office space as well. And there was lots of debate at the time to say, oh God, we really want to use the cork, it's cool, it'll look great.
But will it be okay?
The building is, just for context, sort of 1970s medical lab that was sort of stripped out and fitted out and really lent into that look and feel.
Yeah, cool.
Anyway, needless to say, the cork is absolutely fine and looks as good as new. But I think, much sort of in really big commercial developments, there's still a requirement for sort of robustness of materials. And I think that getting the balance of that right is, it can be tricky, mainly associated with costs.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, the last question I was going to ask around the topic of workplace is more around the point of people coming back to the office, because I think, speaking for myself, I used to do a mega 9-to-5 job. I used to go in early and leave late, and I did enjoy it. Then the pandemic came, the novelty was fantastic. I'm working at home. It's like, I'm never going to go back. And then actually I ended up craving the office. And now I'm trying to be in this area, even within the Architecture Social, and our team members just trying to get the balance. Like, when do we go in for the creativeness? When do we stay at home to be a bit more flexible? Do you have any thoughts of that case use? Do you think that people are more craving the office then, or do you see which way it's going to go?
I think that across the board, not just in our industry, but I think we're definitely starting to see...
Like your clients,
Yeah, I think just, not just necessarily in architecture, a lot of friends and, people that you talk to in the industry, I think people are sort of slowly starting to go back to the office more. I think it's also important conversation to have about, how it relates to COVID in terms of the amount of space that people were taking. Sort of incredibly difficult time financially for a lot of businesses. And, knowing that work from home was available as an option and achievable, I think it meant that a lot of places sort of downsized. So, reduced the area that they were taking in an office space effectively. And I think that in some instances, people have sort of downsized, and you've got a sort of 3-day, work from home 3 days, in the office 3 days, work from home 2 days, and that sort of worked. But I think what we're starting to see now is that, there's key days when people come in, which is usually a Thursday is one of them, especially in our office. Thursday is always one of the busiest days. Monday and Friday, for obvious reasons, quiet. But what it means in those spaces where they've less desks, that, if you have 100% of the office actually coming in on the core days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, there's not enough space, so you sort of burst in at the seams.
So it doesn't work for
I think that then that can be difficult for companies trying to attract people back into the office, because they'll say, well, why should I bother coming in? There's nowhere to sit. The meeting room's full. It's manic, And then conversely, on the Monday and the Friday, the office is empty. And I think that that's really difficult. What I do think as well, though, is that I think it's really, really important to have engagement with your colleagues. And I think that we've definitely experienced it as a practice, that it's super important for people who are learning and are new to the industry, or really in teams as well. You can solve a problem in a couple of minutes just by yelling across the office or engaging with somebody, and it's done. Whereas sort of relying on the work from home, not to say that Teams isn't like a great and effective tool for doing that, but sort of questioning, review, decision
I agree.
making becomes really, really protracted. And I think that, you know, architects especially, we're sort of trained from university to be in the sort of studio culture and bouncing ideas off each other, sort of, you know, positive critique of what we're doing. And I think that's always in the sort of subconscious. So when you remove that, I think you can start to operate in a bit of a mental silo, and I think it does actually affect your productivity.
Yeah.
Not to say that it's not great to be able to work from home on days where you have like an Amazon parcel, or, you know, you want to stick a wash on or something. There's a bit of a balance, but I think that, you know, I think the majority of time in the office is probably the way to go.
I think so.
And you know, and that's all part of the discussion about how do we do that? How do we bring people back in, and how do we retain them?
Yeah.
Another point as well is about attracting and retaining staff to the office. So my point about a lot of this building stock that's due for refurbishment, you know, leased by certain companies or whatever, and, you know, why would somebody come and work in an office that's sort of, you know, lesser spec than what they have at home?
Yeah, that's a good point. It should be somewhere
There's
that
no
they enjoy
draw.
going to.
Yeah. And I think that then the other end of the spectrum there is that, you know, there's been lots of narrative about, you know, the office becoming more like home. It's like we don't want it to be like home, because it's still a professional service.
Yeah.
So it needs to be designed where people are comfortable.
No, you're right.
And that they want to be there, but it's not, you know.
Yeah.
I say bean bags and I don't know what else. Bean bags, I suppose. That's a bit of a weird.
No, I get it. I mean, I think the more and more I think, especially when I studied architecture at part one, I think it's almost impossible. How would you do that on Teams, right? I just can't imagine it. And I think a lot of these listeners might be at different points in their careers. Now, while you work here, I've been here, I've known of you guys. It's a cool environment. But to paint the picture for anyone else, let's talk about the dMFK here. And you'll see I'm reading a very nice newsletter, which is made by you guys. Oh, that's the wrong. You can tell I haven't read it yet.
Is it back to front?
There we go.
No, it's okay.
You know, it looks good. Can you imagine me there, you know, Paddington Station, getting my train with this? But it's really cool projects. I'm joking around, but they're really beautiful stuff. So clearly you do all these awesome projects and stuff. But let's paint the picture. So dMFK, for anyone who hasn't encountered you guys or knows what it's like to work here, what's it like then?
Like, who's listening?
The MD, taking notes.
It's a great place to work, in my opinion. Like I sort of touched on at the start of the discussion, you know, not to sound super cheesy, but when I was looking for my part 2 position, as soon as I walked into the office, which is Cholmondeley Gardens in West Hampstead, it just had a buzz and an atmosphere about it. It may have been to do with the fact that it was a week before Christmas, and I can vividly remember that we were participating in some sort of Reba gingerbread house competition or something. Sort of famously, they were cutting out gingerbread on the laser cutter, and it was sort of a very strong smell in the office as well. And I thought, oh, this is a bit
cool.
Chaotic. This suits me. But yeah, no, it's been really fantastic. Like I say, I joined here when I was at part 2, sort of 8 years ago, or, you know, post part 2, and now sort of AD level, so 8 years later.
Yeah, good for you.
And you know, really focusing, because I've been focused on the commercial projects. It's just been really fantastic to see, like, the portfolio grow. Obviously, it's amazing to be recognised, you know, for your own achievements, but more so it's to come along the journey with everybody who's made it so. And that's been great. And, you know, recently we're growing, we're taking lots of new projects. That's great. We've got quite a few new staff members, and, you know, I think that we've got several people in the office who do a really fantastic job on the sort of social and culture side of things.
Great.
So I think that's a sort of a big draw as well. But I think it's a great place for me. I've never felt like it was particularly, like, hierarchical here.
Okay, cool.
And, you know, what else do I want to say about it? You can cut this bit out.
Oh, that's a nice bit. I think that sets the scene. Well, I was going to say really quick, maybe 1 or 2 quick top tips. So say now, let's pretend you're hiring for your next super cool commercial project. Now imagine you the part 2 before. Do you have any tips that you'd like to give them, or when you're looking at applications today, is there anything that you think that people should do?
I think it's more, for me, it's always about I say, oh, personality hire, but, it's always about, if people have a passion for design, I don't think that, at that level, it's sort of part one or part two, I don't think that you ultimately have to know what you're interested in terms of sector-wise. I don't think you particularly have to have like a 5-year plan of where you want to be, but I think you just know if somebody has like a spark or a passion or an enthusiasm, and people who want to get sort of involved in the projects. We've always sort of had a culture here that, we resource the projects and, we plan as best as we can with the best will in the world. You'd always get 2 major deadlines that collide at the same time. And I think the thing that's always been great is people sort of cross-pollinating over teams and sort of like mucking in to help out, and that that sort of sense of camaraderie has always been really great. So in terms of interview, this is coming from me, but I think obviously there's the technical skills which you need, but I think everybody can learn that to an extent. So for me it's about sort of having the spark and the creativity and like the drive to want to learn and to be involved in the projects. And I think, that's something that I've noticed now. Obviously, we've always had a website, but, when I joined, sort of had a real limited portfolio and sort of, looking at the brochure, the newspaper now, and the website, it's just like fantastic to see how much work we've delivered over the past 5 years, of quite sort of substantial scale. And, it's great that people are coming to us on account of the projects as well. So that's great.
No, it's really, really cool. I love it. I love the projects as well. So I think that's really useful, because I think sometimes some people can almost feel like, oh, gosh, it's so good, I shouldn't. But if, maybe I don't have the Revit as good as they say, so I shouldn't apply. But it's nice to say that actually you should still chuck yourself in.
I think so, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, the last question I was going to have on this kind of curvy subject, so big hot topic this year, you're laughing already, is AI. Everyone bangs on about AI, artificial intelligence. And I would just like to know more about, have you started to see artificial intelligence bleed into the job? Have you started to see little bits of it?
I think so, yeah. I mean, not on a sort of significant scale.
There's
but
no
I think,
part one that's going to be AI.
No,
yet.
I mean, we have some really, what I would say is I say younger gen. That sounds weird. But, part ones, part twos, recently qualified part threes, they all in this office have like exceptional visualization skills. They're really great. And to the point where I'm thinking, I don't actually know how to.
Yeah. I can't remember.
So I'm like, just put it in Photoshop. But, they're really, really very, very skilled. I think there's a couple of people who've sort of been showing us various... I sound like such an old nana now. I'm out of my depth because I don't even know the name of the software. I'm like, Adam. But they've been sort of toying around with it. And I think that a couple of clients as well have sort of got a whiff of it. And they've sort of said, could you produce this? Could you use AI? And it's mainly... I don't think it's going to overtake, the production of visuals or like look and feel, that sort of thing. But what it is really useful for, it's sort of early stage conceptual. So, if you have a sort of client that says, I want it to look like a sort of, glowing orb, da-da-da-da-da, and there's all these parameters. It's been quite successful to sort of whack that in and see what it comes up with. And I think that is... It's a useful tool in experimenting with sort of ideas that can't necessarily be quantified in a drawing, if that makes sense. So I think it's useful for that. And I think it's also useful for sort of tweaking photos or tweaking renders. We've had some successful examples of this and then not so successful. So, for instance, actually on Story, we had the photos taken. Jack Hobhouse, we use him very often, great photographer. There was one photo and we got it in the end, and the chair was sort of slightly off the rug. And we were like, crop it out, I don't know. And then Kim, actually, she AI'd it and sort of made the rug bigger. And we were like, okay, that's really useful application. And likewise with sort of renders, just sort of slightly tweaking I'd say the sort of the tone of the image, so that it looks more like a magazine editorial style image. But yeah, insofar as using it, you know, in any more capacity than that, not at the moment in this practice. I don't think.
No, it's really cool, and I think a lot of people are feeling the same. It seems like a useful tool for key things, but we're not there yet on design me an office, and you know, it's just
I think that's the thing, you know, because it's, you know, while it's really amazing what it can do, you know, it can't contextualize the building or its surroundings or the locations, and those are all of the things that we look at when we first approach a project. You know?
Yeah.
So it will always be devoid of that depth of context, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, of all the jobs to be endangered, I think architects, well, having been a part 2 years ago and how blooming complicated it was, I think it'd be all right for a while. But no, I really appreciate that. The last question I always like to say to my guests, I like to flip it around, actually.
Oh, go on.
And say, do you have a question or two for me? It could be about maybe your office themed. It could be about the architecture social. It could be about anything.
Do I have a question? I wasn't that prepared. No.
Yeah, but you know, on the top of your cuff. What do you think?
You're gonna have to pause this bit now.
Yeah, it's all right. A little interlude.
Let me have a glass of water.
Maybe to do with commercial offices.
Oh. I can't think what I want to ask, actually. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not that interested.
No, let me think. I'll think of something. What can I ask you? Can help me
Yeah,
here.
whatever you want. Did you have anything you'd like to ask me?
I can't think of
anything. How many cameras?
So obviously, this isn't going to be part of it.
No,
Please,
don't
for the
worry.
love of
No,
God, no.
I might keep the funny one in before.
I'll keep the funny,
yeah.
but maybe just edit it down.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm not
I'll make a joke in a bit. We come back with a question. How disappointing it was.
I suppose because I'm not sure how many other sort of offices you interview or what the sort of general.
Maybe ask me about my
is.
experience in offices. I mean, I'm a loud person, so I test out all the loud equipment.
Well, acoustics are key. So where do you actually operate from most of the time?
Okay, this would be the question. Okay, so we're back, and we've got the question that's going to examine me and go deep into my soul. What was the question?
So the question is, where are you based and how do you operate? What is your office space structure and how does it work to benefit the type of thing that you do?
Good question. So in terms of my team, I am the complete post-pandemic work in progress mess, is the truth, right? So I'm in a WeWork flexible. We all rock up on certain days. Yeah, bean bags. Sometimes don't have a table. People are on armchairs getting absolutely bad back problems. I'm whinging going, I need a proper chair. So it's a bit like that. I mean, where it works really well is there is a fluidity and the costs are cheaper compared. So years ago, I used to pay thousands of pounds for another WeWork office, which was like 3 meters by 4 meters, and it was expensive. Whereas actually, this hybrid working, it can be really well. And when days where it works, it's great. But you got to be really organized, which I'm not. So you've got to like make sure there's a seat there. Sometimes they don't have seats there.
Yeah.
And then everyone can have an opinion where they want to go. Oh, it's difficult for me to get to Waterloo today. Okay, well, what about we go to Liverpool Street? Oh, you know, and so you got this whole thing going on. And then at the end, and then you book and you go and someone goes, I didn't realize. So, you know, so there's really pros and cons. I mean, the upside is I think some of my staff love this idea of going to different places or, for example...
Location flexibility.
Yeah, and so one of my members of my team has actually been in Barcelona for 3 weeks working in the WeWorks. It's been kind of like a holiday/work, and it's worked really well. But logistics is quite a headache. So I'm in the future, for me, as we grow as a team, because right now it's 4 of us, I think maybe there would be a base and we would have like periphery
satellite offices.
Like a loose framework, and I think that would be the fit. But it's harder going decentralized to more centralized than going centralized to a bit more fluid.
Yeah.
And there has been the struggle. The struggle. But, you know, working it out as we go. Maybe we should look at TOG.
Yeah.
A TOG made by dMFK. dMFK. Now I'm doing the bloopers.
Blooper reel at the end.
Well, you know what? We're all human, aren't we? But dMFK, what a fantastic practice. And so I thank you so much for being here. What an amazing place. Now, if someone else wants to find out about you guys or get in contact with yourself, where do they find you?
info@dMFK, the website. We've got quite an active Instagram and LinkedIn, obviously all dMFK.
There we go. And to yourself, you're on LinkedIn? You're knocking around?
I'm knocking around on LinkedIn.
Yeah, you're right.
I'm on there,
And, if you're in Good Street, passing by, maybe you were in the background of this, so you can pop in and say hello. Thank you so much for the invitation. And thank you to who's watching. I really, really appreciate it. Whether it's this angle, which is my better angle, or this angle where, hopefully we'll edit more of this one. I really appreciate your time. More coming soon. But do get in contact with dMFK. Super cool practice. I love this stuff. Bye-bye, everyone. Take care. That's it.
Done.
You did it.